All right, so I think we can start this webinar. First, I want to welcome you all tonight, and we will talk about Liveaboard. Will Mark and Shannon, hello. I will talk about Coboters very quickly, probably 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then Mark and Shannon will take over, and they will take us through their adventures and what they learn by living on a boat. And then after the presentation, we can have an open discussion. So I don't know if you guys, some of you are on their boats, maybe you also live on a boat somewhere. So I think, or it's your dream to do it, like it's mine. So it could be a good to discuss, ask questions, and share experience, or whatever questions you want to ask to Mark and Shannon. My name is Phil. I created Coboters about 2 years ago. And what we do in Coboters, it's an online, it's like almost like an online selling club where both owners and crew meet. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. Oh. So yeah, Coboters is it's a network of sailors who want to spend time together on the water. So we have boat owners and crew, and they can meet, and you can meet with boat owners and go sailing. So we have members all over the US and Canada, as well as in the Caribbean. And you can find crew or boats for racing or cruising or offshore, delivery, sometimes just for fun, sometimes for a long period of time. It depends. And the goal is to share time on the water and to share good time, of course, on the water, and make friends, make sailing friends, basically. As I said, you can find boat owners with catamarans, sometimes with smaller boats. We even have people with 25 feet boat up to 50 feet boats. Crew are always welcome, could be beginners, could be very experienced people who used to race and want to race even more. So you go online, you create a profile, and then you can start chatting with other members, including Matt and Sharon right now, and other people. It's pretty, I tried to make it pretty simple, pretty friendly, very friendly, I should say. And you can always ask and call me if you have questions about Coboters, or see how it works. But that was not the topic of the day, so I will stop now and have this brilliant Liveaboard couple tell us more about their stories, what they've done, and why sometime we should listen to YouTube, and probably sometime we should be careful of what we see on YouTube. But I'll let you explain that probably much better than me. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Phil. Let me switch over. We've got a few things just to guide us here. You able to see my slides?
Perfect.
All right, very good. Well, I'm Mark Nauman, as Phil introduced.
Hello, I'm Sharon.
And we are full-time liveaboards. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And we also own a sailing school called Calypso Sailing Life. And really, we're just trying to provide experiences for people very similar to Coboters. So we were very interested when we met Phil at the 2020, I guess it was last year in 2022 at the Annapolis Boat Show. And we have partnered together and try to provide some opportunities for our Coboter members. And we've had some of the members on board, so it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, so the title of the talk is Want to Live Aboard Full-Time? It's Not Like YouTube. And I do want to just up front say it's a little bit of clickbait, because we're not here to trash YouTube. So some of you may not like YouTube. That's fine. But we've gotten a lot of value out of YouTube. And as we watched a variety of YouTube channels, we built a certain perspective of what living on board full time would be like. And then when we actually lived on board full time, it was maybe a little bit different. So that's what we want to talk to you about today. Let's talk a little bit about sort of our experience and how we're living aboard, because that might be very different. Some of you may already own boats. Maybe you're living aboard now, or perhaps you wish to live aboard, but there's all kinds of liveaboards. So in our case, we started sailing. I think in the sailing world, it feels pretty recent. We tell people, well, we've been sailing, for 13 years. Oh, I've been sailing since I was, 3 months old.
We didn't grow up sailing.
We did not grow up sailing. In fact, when I was a little kid, if I just looked at a sailboat at the dock, I would get seasick. So it was not, if you told me 20 years ago I'd be living on board, I just would have laughed and laughed, because that just was not going to happen. But in 2010, we moved to San Diego, and we were looking for San Diego things to do. And that turns out to be, I'm going to say either golf or sailing. There's other things too, like deep sea fishing. But anyway, I don't like golf. So I'd done some sailing before with my brother when I lived in San Diego previously, but Sharon had never been sailing. So we tried it out, and we fell in love with it right away and started taking lessons, and did ASA training, and we started to do bareboat charters, but we'd always used OPB, other people's boats. And for some of you, that's probably pretty familiar. It's kind of a co-boaters theme, actually, really, right? I mean, there are the other people that have boats, and there's other people who want to be on those boats. So that's what we did. And we did bareboat charters. Our first one was in the BVI, which is a pretty popular spot on a monohull. Then we started sailing catamarans, and we started bareboat chartering catamarans all over the world. We chartered in Australia, Croatia. Oh, that was a monohull, but still Croatia. Puget Sound in Washington State area, all over the eastern seaboard, all over the Caribbean, and also in Southern California, chartering over to Santa Catalina Island, for example. So lots of bareboat charter experience. And we decided through a long story I'm not going to really get into, but we decided that in order to achieve some of our other goals in terms of what do we want to do when we're retired and all that kind of stuff, decided let's try owning a boat. Maybe that'll be a good thing and we'll like it, or maybe we'll hate it. But we saw these YouTube people, we were watching all these YouTube channels, and they're living aboard, and it's pretty different. But we really like sailing, so maybe that'll work. So we bought our first boat in 2019. That was a 38-foot Leopard catamaran, Leopard Model 39. And there wasn't much good that came out of COVID, arguably nothing, except that it gave us a lot of time to spend on our boat. So I'm going to call that a good thing. And that got us really to be part-time liveaboards during COVID, because we could work, we still worked full-time in those days. We could work from the boat, and we did. And we were cruising around mostly Florida on the Gulf Coast, but a few other places as well. Yeah, the Bahamas. And decided, yeah, this could be for us. So we think it is, but we would want a bigger boat if we're going to live on it.
Definitely bigger boat.
38-foot cat sounds pretty big, and is big depending on what you might be used to. But if you're going to have all your worldly possessions in one place, which is what we do, we decided we're looking for something bigger. And so a fairly new Leopard 48 kind of fell in our lap in 2021. And so we upgraded to the Leopard 48 that we're on today. Now, and then we moved on a little bit after that, maybe 6 months later, we moved on full time, sold our house, sold our cars, sold most of our possessions. And this is it. This is where we live. And in terms of live aboard, though, for us, what does that mean, right? Because you could live aboard at a marina. You could live aboard, I don't know, in Florida or in Narragansett Bay, and that would be one kind of an experience. You could also live aboard in the South Pacific, or be circumnavigating the world, or do the loop, or a whole bunch of other things. That's not what we're doing. We are currently, in fact, we just arrived today in St. Lucia. So we're in the Caribbean this season, and spent hurricane season in Grenada. And we just arrived today from Beckway in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we spend most of our time at anchor or on a mooring. I would say maybe 70 to 80% of our time, something like that. And we do sometimes spend a little bit of time in marinas, but usually it's when we have to, or it's so hot we need the air conditioning.
Yes.
So for us, we have air conditioning on board, but although we have a generator, shore power is a lot easier. So sometimes we'll go in a marina just to get a little bit of cold air. And there's some conveniences, packages and other things that might be heavy or difficult if you have to cart it back and forth in the dinghy and, you know, things like that. So some occasionally going into a marina, but most of the time we're out on the water. We like it there because you get a nice airflow through the boat. So the lack of air conditioning isn't really a big deal, even in the summertime in the tropics. And of course, now it's way cooled off. It's down at 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know, mid 70s to low 80s. And I know for some of you that would be pretty warm right now, but that's where so that's the kind of liveaboard that we're doing. And next season, it'll be a little bit different because we're going to be focused on the eastern seaboard during hurricane season. So we'll be cruising, actually in Phil's neck of the woods, we'll be up at Narragansett Bay in the summer. We'll be in the Chesapeake in the fall. And we'll be coming back to the Caribbean again in November. Then 2025, we think we may sail to the Med. So we're not circumnavigating, but we do want to get out there and experience lots of different places. And we like to do that primarily from the water as opposed to a marina. So that's important context for you as we're talking about what surprised us, because if you're living aboard in a different kind of context, you'd have different surprises than we have. What else? Anything else?
You didn't introduce Max.
Oh,
That's
Max.
also our liveaboard is our life includes our cat.
Yep. And yeah, we acquired Max as a rescue cat before we really even considered liveaboard. So since he's part of our family, here we are. Now, if you it causes certain challenges when you're doing what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not part of a YouTube thing, but if you want to know more about having pets on board, we have a perspective on that too. We're not going to talk about that today though. Okay, now we watched before we owned a boat, and as we were beginning to learn to sail, as we got more into it, we watched a lot of different YouTube channels. Some of them are depicted here. We used to watch some others that are no longer here because we no longer watch them. And we watched some of these more, well, I'll say religiously, more consistently than others. And the specific channels really aren't the point. You may, if you're watching YouTube channels and you have different ones, great. You should watch the ones that are interesting to you. And as we were watching these YouTubers living their lives and fixing their boats and doing whatever it is that they do, and they're all different, more or less, we started to build a perception of what it would be like to live on board. And as you're going to hear, we have 8 specific things that we're going to talk about today during this talk that were different than we thought, that YouTube really didn't prepare us for very well. And not that YouTube channels don't talk about all the 8 things we're going to talk about. It's just that as we integrated their stories into our perceptions maybe were missing a few things.
Yeah. Or we didn't pay attention to it.
Or maybe we didn't want to know that. And some of them you'll say, oh yeah, well, I wish that weren't true, but it is. So that's part of it. Now, of course, it would be natural, right? YouTube channels, they have specific objectives. They're trying to get people to watch. So they have to tell a story. They're taking a whole week of their life and they're compressing it down to just 20 minutes. So they're not going to show you all the boring stuff. They're not going to show you all the time you spend trying to debug what the problem is with the generator or the whatever. And even those channels that might focus more on the how-to and the boat projects, I think the ones that we've got the logos on here do a little bit of that, but aren't necessarily dedicated to that. Ryan and Sophie do a lot of it. Zatara to some degree does as well. They still need to entertain. They need to add value to the viewer. So, of course, they're not showing you what life is really like, because that'd be boring, actually. It'd take a whole week to show you a week's worth of their life. So that we should expect that. And so let's talk a little bit about what I want to do. So we're not here to badmouth YouTube. We continue to watch YouTube and we learn a lot from them. Some of these YouTubers we've met in person and we are close to some of them. Others are pretty remote from us and we may never meet them, but anyway, we get a lot out of it. Let's jump in. It's enough intro.
Yeah.
Here's a dirty little secret, everybody. Some of you know this if you own a boat, probably, is you sail a lot less than you think you will. Now, I have to, that little asterisk is really important. It depends on what kind of boat you have and what your temperament is. In our case, sailing on a catamaran, you can't sail quite as close to the wind as you can with the monohull, generally speaking. And we have a cruising production cat. It's not a performance cat. So if our apparent wind is less than 45 degrees, just forget it. I mean, I don't even put the sails up. It's not going to do anything. That means we got to have a true wind of 55, 60 degrees, depending on how strong it is. So there's a pretty wide angle there where we just can't go by sail. We can still go, but we have to rely on the iron Genoa for that. And so you may find, like we did, that on the YouTube channel, they're always raising the sail and they're sailing off, and that looks all like pretty exciting, and we love sailing. And in real life, the wind's either too much or too little or the wrong direction. And for example, today was an interesting day. The wind by the forecast was just about perfect. It was 15 knots from the east. Of course, we're in the trade wind, so that's pretty typical. Even a little light maybe, because the forecast was 10 to 15 knots directly from the east. And we were heading from Beckway to St. Lucia, which is mostly directly north. Toward the end, it was a little bit of north-northeast in terms of our boat direction. That's a pretty good angle. But today was also squally weather. So yeah, this morning we had a pretty serious squall hit us. And so even though we started sailing, we had to drop the sails because we had sustained wind over 40 knots, gusting over 45. So got to drop all the canvas for that. Of course, that results in some wave states. It's not very comfortable. Turns out wave state's more important than wind for us. So anyway, got to pay attention to all that. And then you might say, well, why don't you just wait? Well, yeah, we can wait, and we often do wait. We waited actually until today to leave Beckway instead of leaving the last 2 days when the wind was forecasted at 25 knots and the sea state was 3 meters of waves. That's not very comfortable. And so today the forecast was a lot better, but still not quite as nice as it might have been. We did sail about half the time, and about half of that was motor sailing. So there you are, and that's not atypical. So just to be aware, you're not always sailing off into the sunset. Sometimes you're motoring there, but still allows you to go to beautiful places. And we'll talk more about that. All right, so that's our experience. If you're willing to travel at 2 knots and take several days to get from Beckway to St. Lucia, maybe you would just sail that whole way and not use the motor. That's fine. That's great for you. That's kind of not our choice. So I don't hesitate to use iron Genoa if it's appropriate for us to do that. So that's one big thing that you should be aware of, and maybe you already are. The other thing, and you probably glean a little bit of this from YouTube, but everything takes a lot longer than it took when we lived on land. And I've got some examples here. Hopefully you can see them. Let me get rid of the video here. It might be in the way here. If you go ashore and you want to have a meal ashore, we did have dinner ashore tonight. I think it was 2 hours. That was pretty fast.
Yeah, it was.
3 hours for lunch, pretty common.
Well, this is us, and now we're in the tropics on the island, and we are in island time, which is different than if you're maybe in a marina with Pizza Hut down the hall, down the street.
Right, or Beckway that has a place called Pizza Hut, which is not.
But I think the time is for us is getting prepared to get off the boat, get the boat ready, get in the dinghy to wherever we're going, right? Find out, how to tie the dinghy up safely, get off.
Where is that dinghy dog?
Walk, in, and then you have the
island time.
The island time. Right. So I think I have found that small things take more planning. They're more intentional.
Yeah, I think as you said the other day, kind of corollary to the little quote here at the bottom, you said, you're just not spontaneous when you live aboard, at least living aboard the way we do. Now, eating out is just a specific example. You want to go provisioning, count on at least half a day.
Right.
Getting your mail is kind of a big deal when you're live aboard, because even though we're residents of Texas officially, legally, voter roll wise, obviously we're not there. And so getting mail, we get our mail once a week. It's scanned and they email images of our mail. We have some forwarded to friends or family that might be coming, and we shred a lot of stuff, or just download the image. So that happens. But if you want to get a package, even though FedEx works pretty well all over the world, or DHL, or even UPS, UPS sometimes is challenging. You can get the package in 2 days, but you won't get the package because it's got to go through customs, and there's all kinds of paperwork, and there's waiting and waiting and waiting, and there's island time. So even though we just had a package delivered a couple of weeks ago, and it did take 2 days to get from Texas to Grenada. In that case, it was in Grenada, and then it sat in customs and the FedEx process for 2 more weeks. So that's part of it. So yeah, don't try to be spontaneous. It's a problem the way we work. So no such thing as last minute for us.
That's right.
That's why the picture of the dinghy, right? Since we like to be at anchor or on a mooring, depending on where we might be, we happen to be on a mooring ball right here in Marigot Bay in St. Lucia. Anchoring right here is a bit of a challenge. You got to get in your dinghy to go anywhere. So the dinghy is kind of a big part of our life. A lot more difficult than a car that you might be using at home. Not only does everything take longer, everything's harder, and generally speaking, more expensive.
Mark, I'm sorry, you have a question on the chat.
Okay.
I don't know if you said, but the question is, do you use mailing services, and which one?
Yes, we do. Because we lived in, our last land home was in San Antonio, Texas, so we decided to keep our Texas residency because there's no state income tax, among other reasons. We use a service called Texas Home Base. Virtually every state has a service, and many of them can help you achieve residency in that particular state. A lot of people use St. Brendan's Isle in Clearwater, Florida. And that you can, if you don't have residency in Florida, they can help you get residency there. So anyway, those are options that you have. Again, one of the challenges of living aboard. Thanks for that, Phil. If you could monitor that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I have a question for you. Does that mean because everything takes more time, do you plan how much in advance do you need to plan stuff? Do you plan like a month, which may be harder?
Yeah.
How do you manage this?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what it is. We don't have to plan months ahead to eat out, for example, right? I mean, we
okay.
The planning there is where are we going to go? What does it mean to get there? Because we're going to be getting there via dinghy, and then usually walking, or maybe a taxi if we have to. If we're in the States, we could use Uber, but outside the United States and Puerto Rico, you're not going to find Uber anywhere. Here in the Caribbean, I mean to say, obviously it's all over the Europe or Mediterranean and other places. So for things like that, it's probably a few hours in advance. In terms of where we're going to go and like deciding to come to St. Lucia, I started planning that months ago. Because of delays, we didn't leave Grenada when we originally wanted to in actually late October. We weren't able to leave Grenada until late November. And so we had to make a lot of changes. So one of the sayings that I really like that you may have heard before, we don't make up any of these sayings, we just repeat other people, is, sailors make plans in the sand at low tide. So that we make lots of plans and we plan to replan, and we do. So
okay, I have another question on the chat, Mark. Is dinghy? The question says, dinghy is important. What do you do to secure your dinghy, both I can't read, both onshore and on the boat?
Yeah,
good questions.
That's a good question. It depends on where you are. In a lot of places, you just simply you don't have to worry about locking your dinghy up. It may or may not be a good idea. You know, it kind of just depends. In the out islands of the Bahamas, we don't bother. You just don't need to. There is no crime to speak of. Now, of course, I say that now our dinghy will get stolen or something. But other places like, well, right here in St. Lucia where we are, we're in a protected anchorage that is in a marina. And so there's a marina dinghy dock. We don't need to lock up the boat. We could. And when we do need to lock up the dinghy, lock up our dinghy, we have a large cable. Now, look, if the thief is experienced, or if it's not just a whim, there's virtually nothing you can do that is theft proof. Okay, some people get really elaborate and they have 3/8 inch 10 millimeter stainless steel chain that they've welded onto their boat, and oh my god, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess we don't do that. We have a large thick cable. We have a cable lock that is a combination lock. One of the big problems, of course, is corrosion. Part of why everything is harder and takes longer too, or at least the harder part. So you got to make sure you've got something that can withstand the corrosion over time. And when we feel we need to lock up the dinghy ashore, then we use our cable and a lock. And it's the cable is attached securely to the boat transom. Also, our dinghy motor, which is electric. So that's a big thing. Is nobody wants to steal an electric dinghy motor, by the way. So that's a thing. If you have a really nice, let's say Yamaha 15 horsepower, that's a prime target. So you need to lock that dinghy motor to your dinghy securely. We do have a dinghy motor lock on the dinghy. On the boat itself, because we're on a catamaran, we have dinghy davits. We raise the dinghy every night. We do not leave our dinghy in the water. Partly that's because we don't want to foul the dinghy, but also because we just don't need to tempt anybody. So we raise it every night on dinghy davits. So that's what we do. If we're going to leave the boat, either in a marina or a mooring or something like that, then we will lock the dinghy to the dinghy davits. But typically when we're on board, we don't lock the dinghy to the boat. So that's what we do.
I think, and the saying is the same here as it might be, in your local, shopping center parking lot, which is, don't be the easiest and most attractive boat in the at the dinghy dock.
Right.
And then certainly don't make it easy. A lot of boats or dinghies are taken because they don't lift them up. They leave them floating in the water behind, and it's just simply cut the line, and you've got a dinghy and nobody's awake. So
yeah. Although that turns out if all you've done is tie the boat to the dinghy with the painter, the painter comes loose and you say, "Oh, I stole my dinghy." No, actually, it drifted away off across the bay. So that happens a lot too.
Yeah, it happens to me. Even the smallest dinghy on the dock in Rhode Island.
Yeah, that's right.
and going to Florida, what I learned is everybody in Florida lock their dinghies.
That's the other thing, I think, as you look around, and if everyone else is locking their dinghy, you probably ought to lock your dinghy. Again, don't be the easiest target.
Don't be the mark, as they say. Yeah, like West Palm Beach, we often go to West Palm Beach, and we always lock our dinghy there.
Okay, I have another question, and I'll read it for you. And then when appropriate, can you please talk about healthcare coverage? What plans would you recommend, would not recommend, US-based and local? So you can talk about it. I don't know if you have a slide.
Oh, it's right here, actually.
Yeah.
There we go.
Everything is harder, yes.
It is part of everything is harder. Let me go through this and I'll address that question then. Don't let me forget. But everything's harder. Getting fresh food here in the Caribbean can be quite a challenge. And you've got a couple of pictures of empty shelves. And that's exceedingly common, especially for fresh vegetables. Now, you can find vegetable stands, but you got to go find them. You can find bread, but it's often at a bakery. If you want good meat, you're going to have to find a butcher. So as we'll see later on, I'm kind of revealing one of the answers is we shop like our grandparents shopped. We go to the dry goods, we go to the greengrocer, we go to the butcher, we go to the baker. And that's the way you're going to get food. So the super mega grocery store that we're used to in the United States or Canada, or even some places like, I don't know, Marsh Harbor in the Bahamas, or in Nassau, you're not going to find those a lot of places. When you're in Long Island, and you're at Salt Pond, you don't have those options. So you're going to find what you can find. I decided not to put this in here, but just verbally, one of the things I like to describe to people that visit us, our students, for example, is that our shopping list is really short. We don't talk about the prime rib steak and the broccoli and the cucumbers and the tomatoes and the lettuce and the this, that, or the other thing. We've got vegetables, we've got meat, and we've got dry goods, paper, maybe paper products, because you're going to go in the store and see what you can get, and that's what you're going to be able to have. So if you have your favorite brands, yeah, well, good luck with that. You're going to have to get used to other
You
things.
adjust and
Yeah, you
adapt.
adapt.
Yep.
We're going to come back to the medical here because that was a specific question, but other things that are harder. This is true for everyone. It's not just unique to us, but being a liveaboard, marine insurance, boat insurance is a huge issue. It's very expensive. It's hard to get. They're very, especially on a catamaran. Other types of boats, other places to live aboard may be easier and cheaper. But if you want to live aboard full-time on a catamaran in the Caribbean, and actually have a well-rated insurance company that's likely to pay off any claim, I'll put that caveat in there. You can't always find cheap insurance. The question is, will they pay out? In which case, why do you have it? Anyway, it's going to cost a lot and it's going to be hard to find. That's an issue. We live on a boat. All our stuff is on this boat. And so storage is a challenge because there's only so much room to store things on a boat. Even a catamaran, and we have a lot of room. There's a picture of our bilge where it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle or a Jenga puzzle where we've got everything stacked and whatever. And anytime I want to do anything, I've got to go get the stuff I need, which is buried in there somewhere. If it's organized well, you probably know where it is if you're good at this. And yet, even when you know what it is, it might take you 10 minutes or more just to get to it. And of course, then you've pulled a whole bunch of boxes out in order to get to what you need. And then when you're done with it, because you don't have a lot of room, you've got to put it away. So that's part of why everything takes longer too. Every boat project, just getting the stuff you need and then putting everything away can take as long as the boat project itself or longer. Right? I want to change a little, the screw got stripped or something. I need a screw. Well, it's going to take me half an hour. Not because I don't know where stuff is or I don't have the screw, but because I got to get it all out. And then once I've done, I got to put it all back. So that's part of harder. Boat yoga. Couldn't find a picture of me with my head down in the bilge, but you probably have a mental image of that, or maybe you've experienced it yourself. Just trying to get your body into the places that you need to do your boat projects. We call that boat yoga. There's other forms of boat yoga like making the bed, yeah. And stuff you got to do regularly. So all kinds of things that, because it's on a boat, it's physically challenging. And then there's the relationships are harder. There's the family and friends that are not here. And at least in our experience, all those family and friends that say, oh my God, I want to come in. I want to be with you. I want to be in the tropics and sail around. And they typically don't come. That's our experience. I mean, a few occasionally they do, and when it's kids, you got to pay them anyways. You know how that is. Well, that's for our case. But also with friends, and you make new friends because there's other cruisers around, and you might be with them for a week or 2 or 3, and then they're going to go on their way. It's going to be different than where you go. So you make friends with other cruisers, and you say goodbye a lot. So that can be challenging. So maintaining relationships takes just a bit extra effort. Let's talk a little bit about medical. One of us is on Medicare. I'm not going to say who. One of us is not yet on Medicare. And that means that, and we're retired, we don't work full time. Even when we did work, we did a lot of consulting work. So we were self-employed anyway. And getting health insurance that is useful and meaningful outside of the United States, in our case, we're Americans, obviously, is quite a challenge. So you can go to the healthcare.gov or maybe Medicaid in your state and get a policy. But I can tell you right now that policy is only good for services in your state and maybe only in the area you live in or where your residency is. And even though our residency is in Wichita Falls, Texas, I've actually never been there. Sharon lived there once, long, long ago, but I've never even been there. So my healthcare policy from healthcare.gov that I have, which is a compliant healthcare policy, is useless unless I'm actually in Texas. And now when I say useless, what do I mean? I mean, the deductible is extremely high. Their out of network is essentially not covered. And so if I'm flying to Florida and I need to even visit an urgent care, I'm going to pay cash. That's how that's going to work. Now, so what we've done is we've got Medicare is a little bit different because Medicare will cover you outside the country, although there's a bit of a twist in terms of they only cover 60-day trips. So one of us has to go back to the United States at least once every 60 days. So that's kind of an interesting thing. That's part of the harder, longer, and more expensive that we have to deal with. The other of us has an international healthcare plan. And in our case, it's GeoBlue, but there's all kinds of, just do a Google search. And that allows you to get services internationally, which allowed us to, for example, do an annual physical in Grenada. And because it's preventive, the insurance policy covered it and paid for it, including the blood tests and all the blood work and all that kind of stuff. So that's a possibility also. So there's international insurance. Now, for that policy, we also have the U.S. policy add-on, which is intended for people who do not live in the United States but are U.S. citizens, but might require healthcare in the United States. That looks a lot like a typical health plan in the United States with a deductible, and there's in-network and out-of-network, and all the typical crap, that the American healthcare system makes you deal with. International healthcare doesn't. There is no out-of-network. Or you could maybe say it's all out-of-network. I don't know, but the coverage is the same, and it covers some things, and it doesn't cover other things, etc. So that's that.
If you have something very serious, an injury or something, and you need to be brought to the US to get a better hospital or something, is it covered?
Well, those are typically add-on. In our case, because we're divers, we have Dan Boater, which isn't really insurance per se, but it is a repatriation service. So if you have a dire medical emergency, they will repatriate you.
Yeah, it could be a separate insurance for repatriation.
That's right. Yep. Or international insurance can provide that kind of add-on coverage as well. Perhaps a domestic policy could. We didn't look into that, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question. I have a question from someone. Which Medicare plan is more useful for the cruising lifestyle, focused mainly for those living outside the US?
Yeah. So, I would just say this is something you put high on your list. It takes a lot of research, and every situation is going to be different. With the Medicare plans, they none of them really pay for you to live outside of the US. So you make plans to come back, and we've been able to go back because of family. So we get our doctor visits done. We'll go back. We were back for a month in July, and we get our dentist and our doctor and all our physicals and everything done in the US. I do think that when you're out of the country, we plan to pay cash. You go to urgent care, you go local, you go, these countries like Grenada have good health care. And you put together a plan that works for you. There isn't a right answer. Our plan, what we've done, may not work for other folks. Like I said, we have purchased a comprehensive, holistic, pretty expensive policy that is a global policy. Does cover, everything outside the US, but it also covers in the US. Most global policies only cover out of the US, and those are not as expensive. Those aren't terrible. Everything costs more, but when you add in the US coverage, it can get very expensive. But going uncovered can leave you at high risk if something significant happened and you didn't have coverage. So all I can say is it bears paying a lot of attention to it. For 18 months after we moved aboard, we were on Cobra. So we stayed on our prior employer's plan. And that turned out to be a really good arrangement for us until it expired. And we spent months trying to figure out what to do. So
Yeah.
happy to talk more about what we've done or even how we found out what we've done. But I can pretty much tell you you're going to have a different answer for everybody, but I would start soon. It's kind of like the marine insurance, figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah. On the marine insurance side, if you're thinking about buying a boat, you should be talking to an insurance broker.
Okay. I have two more things. Just a remark here. Allianz.com has a great travel insurance that covers you outside of the USA for 90 days. It costs about $500 for a full year.
Right.
And then I have another question, which is probably something related to a previous topic, like boat yoga. I did 2 weeks on the boat, and then I actually got very toned, even though I was exercising. Do you feel like you are using your muscles more than on land, for example, just to keep your balance?
Yeah, I do think that that it is healthy for folks, particularly as you get older. It is about balance. So
yeah, I would say I've had the same experience, Phil, but it happens when we're underway a lot.
Yeah.
But in the liveaboard life, like we live, we're not underway a lot also. So right now we happen to be moving quite a bit. So every week we're usually moving, once or twice a week or more. And so that means we're hoisting sails and doing all the boating things that, take quite a bit of energy. So that helps. When we were in Grenada for hurricane season, we might spend a couple of weeks at an anchorage without moving. And then you're not exercising very much. So now you got to find other ways. Now, when you go ashore, you have to walk a lot.
You're not moving, but we have been on the boat and had it feel like it was moving. So even because we are at anchor, we're have a mooring ball, and the water can get really rough, and that walking and having to balance is actually very healthy for you. It's mentally and physically healthy because you're engaging. You are much more intentional. I will tell you that too. Which then you try to walk around the boat or go up and down these stairs and stuff. You definitely want to make sure that you're hanging on and you're not going to fall over.
Yeah,
because your world moves.
So for health.
All right. So sorry, if we can, I have some message here asking us to kind of move on to the next topic. Okay. I don't know if you want to introduce, but I think we did the healthcare things. I think everybody got it. Thank you.
Yep. And good. So the fourth point is there's even more boat work than you think there is. And if you watch the YouTube channels, you'll see a lot of boat projects. But you might have heard this phrase, cruising is fixing your boat in exotic locations. It's really true. And there's the other phrase, I don't know who coined it, but I heard a lot, is everything on your boat is broken, you just don't know it yet. And just 2 days ago, the batteries are a little low and it's cloudy and raining today, so better start the generator. And I go to start the generator and nothing. So, hey, worked 2 days ago. What's going on here, right? So, yep, boat projects are cropping up all the time. You got to pick and choose. You can't get them all done, is our experience. And so I have a long list of boat projects that I can pick up. Some are more urgent than others, of course. Anything that's safety related, that's a different thing, right? We have to deal with that. Most of them are more convenience related than anything else. And so you have to decide, can you live without the convenience or not? So lots and lots of boat projects, even more than you might think there is watching YouTube channels.
Even on a kind of a new boat or newer boat.
It doesn't matter. The marine environment is just brutal. Everything's rusted and corroding, and even stainless steel, as you know, isn't rust proof. It's only stainless. So especially some of your stainless components might be bought on a budget store and it's 304 stainless and not 316, and then you find out that the hard way, and there's all kinds of stuff like that you got to deal with. So even a brand new boat, stuff is going to break because it's made broken, and things wear out just so much faster. So So given all that, whoops, sorry about that. Let's go back here. You got to take breaks. It sounds really weird. I know my family thinks I'm really strange. We like to go cruising. And last summer we went on a cruise with some friends of ours. And one of my family members was like, "What? You live on a boat? You're going on a cruise? But why would you do that?" And it's because you have no idea what living on a boat is like. That's why living on a boat's a lot of hard work, actually. It's much harder than living on land in our experience. And so you got to take those breaks. Maybe you just have to take a break from each other. If you're in a relationship, a couple relationship on board, maybe you'll, why don't you go ashore and do some shopping and I'll stay on board, or vice versa. There's some of that. Just getting away from the boat might be just take a walk in the jungle or the forest and just leave it alone for a few hours. It could be that level. Obviously, back to the relationship thing, you may go visiting your friends and family in order to maintain those relationships, because they may not come to see you as much as they say they will. And there are vacations. I mean, I know living on a boat sounds like it is a vacation, but as we just described, vacation is different. A vacation is disengaging. It's not working on boat projects. It's not worrying about whether you're going to find fresh tomatoes today and that kind of stuff. It's going off and just enjoying time wherever it is. It might be camping, it might be luxury or whatever it is, but you got to take breaks, and we found that to be really important. So that's good. And also take a slower pace. Everything's harder and takes longer, so plan to do less. Take your time, embrace the journey. Like I said, we've learned to shop like our grandparents shop. Does it take longer? Yes. And we also get, some things are better, right? Go to that bakery and that fresh baked bread. You don't find that in the mega superstores. The butcher has much better meat than you're going to find in any kind of grocery. So, it's kind of the point. I mean, a lot of people want to live aboard a boat, so they leave the rat race. So leave the rat race. Yeah. And maybe even sort of recognizing that, well, because this takes longer, because it's harder, slow down, enjoy it, take your time, let it happen. And you're going to find that you build a network. I didn't know how to do these boat projects when I started. I have an electrical engineering degree, but I'm not an electrician. I'm not a mechanic, and I'm not. I did not own a boat before our first boat. So I found that you find people who are in the know, who will teach you or who can be available to help you. People in the industry. The upper right picture there is Laurent at Just Catamarans in Dania Beach, Florida. If you've ever had a Florida Just Cats, you know Laurent, because he's the guy. He's super cool. Gives you his phone number. I regularly text him a couple times a year, and he responds, unless it's on vacation. He responds and helps me out and gives me ideas and says, no, try this first and whatever. There's lots of cruisers around you, at least when you're in an anchorage or maybe a marina. There's other people that are cruisers, and they're around, and they may know. Finding them, there may be cruisers nets to help find them. There's always locals. Locals know a lot, and some of them can be very skilled. Now, some of the locals are not skilled. So typically we're looking for people where there's a recommendation who are locals. But we found outstanding local people in the industry that are just as reliable as Laurent, for example. I just found a great mechanic in Grenada, for example. If you need a mechanic in Grenada, let me know. And there's other people who aren't local or near you, like cruisers, on Facebook. And there's tons of Facebook groups for every system and boat imaginable. Well, I say that, maybe not for your specific boat, but maybe for the type of sailing that you do or the type of systems that you have. I can almost guarantee there's a Facebook group out there. And it is social media, so you got to put up with social media and all the trolls. And yeah, that, maybe you don't want to. That's up to you, but there are knowledgeable people there as well. And maybe you can help some others by contributing too when other people have questions. And then there's YouTube again, right? There's a picture of the back of Keith Whitaker's head on Sailing Zatara fixing something. He does a lot of boat repair projects on their channel, and you can learn from them. And again, others do too. So, and even if it's not a sailing YouTube channel, there's the manufacturers often provide great YouTube videos about how to install or repair their equipment, and you can learn a lot from them as well. So you can build this network, and you kind of learn to know where to go in order to maybe take a little bit less time and to make the harder things a little bit less hard, and learn how to do stuff you didn't know how to do. And you know what? Here's the key message. You'll figure it out. If I can figure it out, you can figure it out, as we have done, and embrace the whole thing so that you can sail around and see all kinds of beautiful places like we've depicted here, and have some outstanding, unique experiences. And if you've never had Santa and the elf visit you on a dinghy on Christmas morning
In the Bahamas.
in the
yeah.
Bahamas, that's something to look forward to. That bottom center picture, by the way, is a couple of co-boaters who joined us on a passage from St. Thomas to Grenada back in June. And there's potlucks on the beach, and there's animals, and there's cities, and there's wildernesses, and all kinds of great experiences that you can get to enjoy. But just understand that there's going to be lots of boat projects. They're going to take longer. They're going to be harder, and you're going to figure it out. So we haven't given it up. We still watch YouTube, and we hope you can do that too.
Yes. Okay. I have several questions here. One of them is when you leave. First of all, I have someone who says this is very interesting because we're moving aboard next November, and are planning to continue working for our companies from the boat. Less about slowing down, of course, and more about change of scenery.
Yeah.
I wonder how viable that will be. We'll find out. That's exactly what you said. You'll find out.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's hard to plan everything, but thank you for this remark. It's very interesting to share that. So here's a question. When you leave your boat for a day or part of the day, what do you do for security when you leave the boat on a mooring or anchor? Security systems, remote monitoring, spot trace. Do you have any of those tools?
In our case, no, we haven't found them necessary. I'm not saying they're not necessary everywhere in the world, but even in anchorages in the Caribbean, I think you'll find in general, maybe you want to lock your gangway or your sliding door if you're on a catamaran. We sometimes do that. We typically don't.
But do you lock your passports or your
we have
and maybe some cash somewhere?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you don't want to lay expensive, again, don't be the easy mark, right? So don't leave your expensive camera equipment laying in the cockpit. You're just asking for somebody to come by and filch it. I mean, you don't want to do that. So we have cash. You've got to have a lot of cash, actually. Mm-hmm. We have cash, which is well hidden. I'll say that. And our valuables are put away. But now it depends on where we are. If we're just leaving for an afternoon, we've got an outing going on, and we're at anchor, we probably leave the boat somewhat open. We have a cat on board, so we're not going to lock everything up because it would be sweltering in the tropics. And so we may have some port lights open for some ventilation. We may leave our sliding door open. Now, are we asking for it? Maybe someday. Again, don't leave a bunch of stuff laying out that's advertising. We have a dinghy on davits. So when we remove our dinghy or take our dinghy away, we raise the davits. Now, in our case, we have davit arms. So if you have davit arms leaving out, you're just advertising that you're not on the boat. So, don't advertise. Don't leave stuff out there. If we leave the boat for a longer period of time because we're going to visit family or friends, that's different. All the cockpit cushions come in the boat. All the doors are locked. We put in a dehumidifier. We don't leave the cat on the boat for more than a few days. The cat goes to boarding or whatever, or we take them with us.
Are you able to find someone to look at, watch your boat while you're away? I guess you can talk to other friends or people around you. Possibly.
A lot of places, it's a service that you can purchase, which might, if it's a long term, for example, in July, we left for a month. The boat was in Grenada on a mooring ball, and we hired someone in Grenada. They called it guardianage. That's what they call it. But basically, it's a yacht service. They'd call it yacht service in the United States. And some guy who has a dinghy comes on board. He starts the engines and the generator, and he checks the bilges. And I gave him a list and a little check thing, and he checked it off each time he came on board. And now when we leave the boat like that, whether it's marina or mooring, we don't leave the boat for long periods of time at anchor. We'll typically have somebody check on the systems. We do have a remote camera that I set up only for when we're leaving the boat for long periods. We happen to use Alfred Cam, but don't have anything to do with that brand. That's just the brand we have. And from the internet, then I can, it'll tell me if it's motion detection. So it'll take video of any motion it detects, and it gives me a notification. I can go check it live anytime I want. And so I can, look at some things if I want to when we're away from the boat for long periods of time. We don't do that for leaving it for the day or even short periods. So
I would say that there be, whether it's Facebook groups or the cruisers nets, the places that we go, first of all, it's being diligent. There is a lot of information out there that you can read that will tell you where places might have more risk of something bad happening. But when something happens in a small community, and these are very small community in these islands here, cruisers don't go. The word gets out and cruisers won't go there. So the local communities do a lot of their, I think, self-policing, and there really is a sense of safety in numbers. And so that's what we've done. And I think that's about as good as you can do. Because
that's part of don't be the easy mark, right? So don't go and enter out and leave your boat when it's an area that has some.
And there are places, for instance, in Nassau, Bahamas, that you have to take a whole nother level of security. I mean, even walking on the sidewalks there. So
yeah, I've been there. I know.
Yes.
So I have first of all, Heidi says hi.
Oh, Heidi, are you online?
Heidi, and I say hi to Heidi as well. And then I have a question that I wanted to ask you. So I'm glad someone else did it as well. It says, I see you have a parasail spinnaker.
Yes.
Has it been a good choice for you? Have you found it to be more complex to manage?
Well, the thing about the parasailer, in our case, it's an Oxley Levant, as opposed to the brand parasailer. It's difficult to get up and it's difficult to put away, but when it's up, it's heaven. So it's my favorite sail to sail with. It's not my favorite sail to set up or to put away because it's huge, because we have a 48-foot boat is pretty big. So getting it up is a challenge. It's just two of us. So if Sharon's at the helm, it's usually Sharon, and I'm trying to manhandle that sail. It can be quite challenging.
Do you have an electric winch?
Yes.
Well, we do have electric winches, and so that helps a lot. And with our size boat, that's important. Even for them, I mean, our mainsail weighs over 400 pounds fully loaded. Forgetting the wind, just the weight of the sail and the reefing lines and the blocks and all that stuff is 400 pounds. So you don't lift that by hand. You got to have, or with a simple winch, you got to have an electric winch. So we have electric winches, but the parasailer is awesome. Yeah, we love it.
I had a question from Rick. It says, hi, Rick. I need to go back to your questions. Your question was, it's for me, Phil, is there an opportunity for co-boaters to facilitate repair, advice, and discussion? So the answer is yes. We do have on co-boaters a forum that, the old days forum before before Facebook, I should say. And you can ask questions to the co-boaters community on the co-boaters website. It's pretty easy, and you can go to your profile, say profile forum questions, and up you go. So yeah, there's a way to do it. And then the other question or remark, my wife is reluctant to embrace the Liveaboard life because there are too many places on earth she wants to visit. Too many to visit that you can sail. How do you deal with the idea that you can get for instance, visit the Great Wall or the ski in the Alps from your boat?
Yeah, I think when we were in the discussion phase of transitioning our life from our life where we worked and we chose vacations and we traveled to Europe and we would go visit these beautiful places, and we would sail on vacations. They were our breaks. That coming to moving aboard the boat for us, we still needed to take those same vacations. And so I think that was in one of the slides, which is if you go to Europe every year, somehow you need to keep doing that. This doesn't stop that. It's like us going on a cruise. We like cruises because they have they have room service and entertainment and all of that good stuff. So we don't want to give that up. This is now our home and our base of our life, and we're very comfortable then leaving it. So we'll be actually traveling to Africa next year, and it means more work. It's not like we can lock our door and leave like when we had a land home. So it takes a lot of planning for us to be gone from the boat and where are we going to leave it. But
services to check the systems. And
it is definitely something to have those conversations about. And for us, it meant we needed to keep having, land excursions and land visits and that in addition to this wonderful life that we have seeing all the islands in our boat.
Okay, and another question. Very interesting questions, by the way. Thank you everyone to participate. It's great. Is your tender offshore cruising tenders or boat SUV?
It's yes, ocean crossing tenders. We have a 330.
So what's a tender? I'm sorry, I don't know what it means.
Oh,
dinghy.
A dinghy.
Ah, okay.
It's a hard dinghy, not inflatable. It's fiberglass. It's made in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
We also have
on that picture.
must be in one of the pictures. Mm-hmm. And we use an electric outboard. So we have a Torqeedo Cruise 6, which is horsepower doesn't really work that well, but let's call it 10 horsepower. And
yeah, I had a question about that. Can you charge it on your boat with your generator?
Yeah, we don't even need the generator. We have a large LiFePO for lithium battery house bank, and we have a large inverter. And so the AC charger, we just plug it in and we charge the battery right off of our house bank through the inverter in our case. You could run the generator if you needed to.
All right, I have for you another question. For your specific Liveaboard 48 and lifestyle, what is your monthly budget for your Liveaboard lifestyle? Which is, I went on some YouTube channel and asked this question on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I had from $1,000 a month to $10,000 a month.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
It was, I couldn't figure it out by myself.
Well, because there isn't one answer. It's going to be different for everybody.
It is. It's like asking people who live on land, what's your monthly cost to live on land? And so you make those decisions comparable to your living on land. The first is your boat and how much are you paying for your boat and the insurance. How much are you staying in marinas? Because marinas are very expensive compared to being on anchor. How much are you eating out? All those happy hours at the bar and stuff like that versus eating on your boat. So it really is, it's probably easier to think about how do you live now and can you live on a boat at that level? What would it take? What size of a boat? So I actually do. And that's why with all the videos that we watch, the YouTubers watch, they are very different. Some of them, we just sit there and say, oh my gosh, they're spending so much money. And others of them live very frugally. Yeah. So you can do it either way, but you need to put that into your planning. Yeah. And it's going to cost you more than what you planned for when you were doing your planning. I can tell you that. And
this is an important question. People ask it all the time. And SV Delos, for example, was just featured, I think, in some major media channel like CBS or something like that as Liveaboard. They're in the South Pacific, and it talks about how much money they spent. I know the Gone with the Winds, they've talked about their monthly expenses. I know that who else has done that? Ryan and Sophie Sailing has done that. So the O'Kellys actually did a very in-depth, how much money did they spend on a boat? And to Phil's point, you're exactly right, Phil. I mean, it could be a few $100s a month, especially if you own your boat outright, pay cash. In our case, that didn't make sense. We have a boat loan, so that's part of our expense. We have a mortgage. Insurance isn't a monthly thing. You got to pay that up front, by the way. It's not like car insurance. You don't get to pay up. Well, maybe if you have a car insurance company like State Farm, and that works for some people, and they'll cover your boat, maybe you can do it by the month. We have Concept Special Risk, which is a London-based insurance company, and we have to pay it all the entire year on day one. So that's a giant, huge bill that I've got to pay. So and then there's maintenance on the boat. You know, it's pretty well documented that you should assume that about 10% of the current value of your boat you should plan to spend every year on the average. Some years just spend a lot less. Some years you're going to spend a lot more. So put that money away. And when you got to buy all new sails, which only happens once every 10 years, let's say, you know, that's a lot of money, but it's only once every 10 years. You got to do your diesel maintenance every few hundred hours or whatever your engine requirements are. And maybe you do that yourself. Maybe you hire it out. Whatever it is.
You do the bottom yourself, yeah, versus hiring.
Yeah, and you got to clean the bottom of your boat, which, by the way, we got to find some.
Yeah. What about being online or the internet? Do you need internet access for your remote cameras? That's a question I wanted to ask. Do you what kind of? I mean, now we see you, we hear and we see you clear. And
I know we love
really nice.
And
so
this,
what do you guys
wasn't
use?
like this that long ago. Yeah, you wouldn't have been.
I think it's getting better every year, but
yeah, it's getting better and better. For the last year and a half, we've had Starlink. We started with a regular residential dish, the one with the motors that tilt around, if you're familiar with that. This year, I upgraded to the high performance dish because the movable dish has problems when you move the boat. It's actually not supported by Starlink. They tell you nowadays it will work, but avoids a warranty, I think is their official line. Fine. I upgraded us to the high performance dish. Now, prior to that, we used cellular cards, SIM cards. And when you've got 5G, that's great. 5G is great, but you're only going to find 5G in the United States. You get to the out islands of the Bahamas. If you have 4G, you'll be really lucky. Probably only 3G. So can you get email? Yeah, sure. No problem. Surfing the internet and Zoom calls, forget it. You're not going to do that. You're going to need a minimum of 4G for that. So, you know, if you don't want to get Starlink for whatever reason, it is not cheap. I mean, the hardware is not cheap and the monthly service isn't cheap. Then you're going to be relying on SIM cards for data if you're going to have internet access. And so you'll have whatever limits are locally available in cellular data.
Is Starlink reliable? Because I heard so many stories about Starlink. So
we found Starlink.
Someone is asking the same question, by the way.
Yeah, we found Starlink to be very reliable. There are challenges with any satellite-based communication. It's not unique to Starlink. So, for example, we're in the tropics. It rains in the tropics. It can rain a lot, and can rain very hard. When it rains very hard, we lose satellite connection. Because the water and the frequencies at which the satellite communication works are not compatible. So heavy water flow over the antenna face means you're not going to have internet access. That's a problem. If you're underway, you might drop out. So you might get dropouts, and that could be a challenge. Now, when we're underway, we don't do Zoom calls. Some people try to do that, and that's fine if it works for you. For me, that's a sure way to get seasick. I'm not going to do that. The other is if it's very calm and you're underway, maybe I know Sharon had done some when she worked, had done some if it's under the right conditions. And great if it works for you, but we're retired now, so you don't really have to do that. But we found Starlink to be very reliable.
And it's good if you are working and if you have a supportive team, because that's usually the bigger thing. And so we'll have a plan, and if there's a critical meeting coming up, I'll say, this is a critical meeting, which means we need to be somewhere and stay flat and hope it doesn't rain. But I also have been on a call and a meeting with a team and looked out and seen something happening and said, I gotta go because the sales are flying or something. So that's always kind of funny. So I have a really supportive team. But before Starlink, in the early days of it, it was a lot worse and a lot less reliable. But now, I mean, it's
it was probably, I mean, I
game
remember
changer.
it was much more expensive as well. And we do have another question. Do you have a Iridium Go as communications backup?
Yes.
We have a lot of
Safety
connectivity.
and-
We do have an Iridium Go. That's our backup device now.
Mhm.
Actually, right now, I don't have an active plans, but when we go on long passages, we have some passages coming up this year, 2024, where I'll get get a new SIM card and renew a plan so that I make sure we have backup in case something happens with Starlink. So yes, we do have that. We also have a Garmin InReach, which has some text capability and also SOS capability for search and rescue. So does Iridium Go for that matter. In addition to EPIRBs and PLBs and a whole bunch of other satellite-based, emergency devices.
Okay, great. I don't see more questions coming in. So if you do have questions, please go ahead. Ask questions now. Of course, you can always get in touch with Mark and Sharon at any time, I guess, guys.
Yeah, you can see our email address
Yep.
right there. We're happy to answer your questions. At Calypso Sailing Life, we just invite people on board to experience life on a catamaran. We're not a charter company. We're not a captain charter. We're here to teach you. And we do certification training and we do other kinds of stuff to help people pursue their dreams. And if some of that's answering questions you might have, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, one more question. One more technical question. Do you have a second electric outboard battery, or had one battery been sufficient?
We have a separate outboard motor. So
Yep.
we lost our electric outboard motor at the very beginning of this year and did not have a backup and
Stopped
ended up
working. It didn't actually get lost.
Correct. No, it had a failure that had to go back to the factory for repair, or not the factory, but to a service center, which meant shipping it back to the United States, which is a very expensive endeavor, by the way. It takes forever. Everything takes longer and it's harder. And we didn't have a motor. Now in the Bahamas, that was in the Bahamas, and there's a lot of current in the Bahamas. So trying to row your dinghy in the Bahamas is not going to be very useful. So we ended up having to buy a gas outboard for a little while until we could get it fixed. And what we did in the meantime is, once we got to Puerto Rico, is we actually bought a second electric outboard. It's lower power, but so we actually have a backup electric outboard motor. And then we did eventually get our Torpedo fixed, and so we did sell our Yamaha outboard. But anyway, we have a spare motor.
Okay, more questions. Which is great. How did your kids deal with mom and dad selling their home and sailing off into the sunset?
Yeah.
Well, for us, our kids are all adults.
We
So
kind of left our kids a long time ago. So we met in Oregon, and then we moved away from Oregon to California and San Diego, where we started sailing. And then we moved away again to San Antonio. So we had already kind of left our kids that are all grown
they're all
up.
adults.
And now they've dispersed. They live around. So I think they were
Just to be
less
fair and
surprised.
bragging slightly,
Yeah.
is together we have 7 kids, not together, and we have 7 grandkids.
Yes, we do.
8 is on the way.
Yeah.
So they're all adults and they're fully functional and all of that. So yeah, as she said, we left them a long time ago.
But that's important. That's part of the missing. And that's part of also the whether you're doing FaceTime or video calls now, because you can do
Yeah.
that. And then we make an effort. There are a few of them that will come to visit us, but not very many of our kids are much interested in boats. So we go back and visit them and our grandkids.
Thank you. And another question, provisioning. What is your process for provisioning for passages? Any tools, spreadsheet that you use?
Good question.
Yeah, how do you plan your... I mean,
Yeah.
do you do long passages? How long? I mean, I know you do sometimes because I have some
Yeah.
cowboys that went with you.
Yeah.
So how do you calculate a lot.
Longest passages we typically do are about a week, maybe 10 days. And now we are talking about sailing to the Med, so that'll be from Caribbean to Bermuda.
That's a big maybe in the
Azores.
future somewhere.
Yeah. And maybe Sharon doesn't go and I go with crew members, maybe co-boater people, who knows?
I'll be happy to go with you, Mark.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, we'll be advertising for them. We have some coming up this year, not to the Med, but you know, there's a kind of a basic thing is you do some basic meal planning, and ours is a little bit loose. We don't plan exactly who's going to eat what for breakfast every single day. We've got a collection of breakfast stuff, and we just make sure we buy enough. And maybe it's we buy too much. I'd rather buy too much than not have enough. Breakfasts and lunches are pretty open and loose on board. Dinners tend to be a little bit more structured. But again, it would be sort of, well, we're going to have this meal. We're going to have that about 3 or 4 times on this passage. So we need enough provisions for that to have 3 or 4 of that meal. And then, you know, we're going to have 6 or 7, you know, whatever it is, 5 or 6 other meals that we're going to rotate through for longer passages. We just need enough for all of those. And then, you know, extra. So we typically plan for at least 20% more. So ours is a little bit loose. Other people have much more elaborate planning structures. A really great resource, by the way, for everybody is the boat galley.
Yeah, I know this. I met them. They're very good. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can just go to just Google search for the boat galley. I don't happen to know their website name off the top, but they've been publishing articles on these types of topics and many others for years and years, and they're all available. And you can go there and search them and sign up for their newsletter. She sends out a newsletter once every couple of weeks ish. Maybe not quite as periodic, but where she usually talks about some new thing, and she also will republish some old things. And a lot of these, like provisioning for passage, storage on a boat, passage planning. I know it's the boat galley, but it's really more like boat life, even though the name is boat galley. So that's a really good resource that anybody would probably get benefit from.
Okay, thanks. Do we have more questions? I just put something that I put this webinar on YouTube on the Coboaters channel.
Yeah.
So you just go to YouTube Coboaters, probably done tomorrow. And then of course, if you have more questions, you can always contact Mark and Sharon. What I like, and the reason we decided to partner together is because what I like with Mark and Sharon is not like most of the other people I met, is they're really here to share their experience and give you a way to learn by being on the boat with them. And I really like this. This is what Coboaters is about, is to learn from each other. So that's why we partnered together. Thank you very much, Mark and Sharon. I learned a lot of things. You know, I thought I knew everything, but of course I did not.
Oh.
Thank you so much. Both
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.